It's shitty owners. Everything can be tracked back to poor management, poor ownership. So many of our crappy owners are world-class technicians that get tired of working for crappy owners and want to go open their own shop, but they never learned how to be a good owner.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting, thought-provoking episode of the Jaded Mechanic Podcast. My name's Jeff, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey of reflection and insight into the toils and triumphs of a career in automotive repair. After more than 20 years of skin, knuckles, and tool debt, I want to share my perspectives and hear other people's thoughts about our industry. So pour yourself a strong coffee or grab a cold Canadian beer and get ready for some great conversation. Welcome back, everybody. With me tonight, a really good friend of mine, Mike Allen, is here. Mike is a whiskey connoisseur and a shop owner, and has some very interesting perspectives and stories. And I'm very honored to have him on this podcast with me tonight. And we're going to get to know Mike, I hope. So, Mike, how was your Thursday?
It was good, man, and thank you for having me. And I hesitate to start off with a correction, but you said I'm a whiskey connoisseur. I'm more of a whiskey consumer. But I drink all the whiskeys, not just the snooty
Not just
whiskeys.
the snooty whiskeys. Yeah. I don't partake in too much of the snooty stuff either. The high end bourbon is for a different class of people than where I put myself.
I just try to hang out with Lucas a lot, and then he buys it.
But it's so. I mean, Brian Pollock made the joke that, like, you know, you probably saw it. Lucas had a very expensive bottle up, and Brian's like, "Oh, I would definitely mix that with Dr. Pepper and drink it over ice." And Lucas like came unglued, right? Because it's probably, you know,
lived until you've had Diet Dr. Pepper and Pappy Van Winkle. I mean, it's
snooty whiskey. I mean, we're up here in Canada. We're known for our whiskey. We have some pretty good stuff, but I don't buy the high barrel stuff. I tend to stick to Crown Royal, which is our one of our great Canadian gifts to everybody else. It's
it gets the job done, man. It achieves the desired
It's
effect.
delicious. So starting out, what's tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located. Are you a multi-shop owner now, Mike? You're up to 3? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So name of my business is CarFix. 3 locations in and around Raleigh, North Carolina. I have aspirations to continue to grow, but the industry is all over known. I grew up in my dad's shop. My dad grew up in his dad's shop. So since 1937, that's kind of been what my family has done. Interestingly, my grandfather's shop was like the community center. It was the gathering spot for single men, because when he built the shop before he got married, it was the feed lot for all the local farmers. It was the grocery store, and it was the auto repair facility. And when he started out, it was cars, farm equipment, and buggies.
Right.
So we've got a picture of him with a Model T on a drive-on lift and a buggy next to it. He was working on them both.
Very cool. Very cool.
That was neat. My dad literally grew up in that shop because there was a bedroom, a living room, and a kitchen built onto the back of the 2 bays and the grocery store. Yeah. So that's where he grew up. He said, "I never want to be in the auto business, and I'm going to go away to college." He went to college, and college was not for him, and he dropped out. And he started a family. He tried to do other businesses. He got sucked back in. He ended up opening his own shop, and that's where I grew up. And I grew up, busting tires and changing oil and sweeping and taking out the trash. And I hated it, and I'm not going to be in this industry. And I went away to college, and college wasn't for me, and I dropped out. And I tried to do other things, and I got sucked back in. And so CarFix was born in 2004 with the help of my father. And total transparency, my father was the seed money for that. And it was before I was frankly, before I was mature enough to have a business of my own. I went there as an employee and finally decided to start growing up a little bit and ended up buying the business from my father. In 2019, I opened store number 2. In 2021, I opened store number 3. And with any luck, number 4 won't be far behind.
On. So you're definitely like, when people say it gets in your blood, right? Like motor oil and grease is in it. It's literally probably close to being in the DNA, right? When you think about, like, it's one thing to go to the shop every day, but Grandpa lived on the back end of the shop, and then you guys grew up in there. That's some strong lineage, man. That's pretty cool. I admire the heck out of that. You think it's just like when you say your dad went to school for something else and it wasn't for him, and you tried to go down a different way and it wasn't, is it just because, like, is it a personality thing that just makes you think that, or is it like, I mean, obviously there's love for the industry. There's no question about that. But do you think there's something in your personality that just, like, it feels the most comfortable? This is like, do you feel like this is, like, I say all the time, I feel like I was put here to do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So for Dad, he is one of the smartest guys I've ever met, right? He has a very low tolerance for, or is this a rated PG podcast?
No, you can be as organic, transparent, and as natural. I'm not worried about this, the few curse words that come out. It's for adults.
All right. Dad's got a very low tolerance for bullshit, right? And that's how he was raised. Our whole family's that way. And he grew up in a very direct, very straightforward, you say what you mean, there's no window dressing kind of world. And he went away to university from a very rural, very blue collar setting. And he was trying to go to engineering school. And, the academic, the mental capacity was there, but he just couldn't put up with the reality that is university life, right? Add to that, he got married and was starting a family. He decided just to go start making a living. And I can't fault him there. My educational experience was way different. I was very fortunate. By the time I came along, Dad had already started getting some coaching in his business.
Right on.
And so I got to witness that transition from, it was like 120 cars a day at $80 a repair order. It was just a madhouse. We would unload an 18-wheeler of tires every week into the warehouse in the back, and it was just, we were a high volume tire store. And pull a set of wires out of the trash and plug one on that made connection and send them to the dealership when it was misfiring, that type of deal, right? And that transition from that to an actual repair and maintenance facility with higher skill level technicians and taking things seriously and training and raising labor rates to be able to give benefits and that kind of thing. That happened while I was watching as a teenager, right?
Good stuff.
And Dad made a conscious effort to teach me about running a business rather than to have me learning about, auto repair and maintenance. So, I had an understanding of theory of operation and systems and that kind of thing, but really, the school, quote unquote, that I went to with Dad was how to read a financial statement and what you should do for marketing and how to handle customers and how to deal with, upset employees and things of that nature. And that I owe everything to that because that set me up for success when I finally started.
So was he how big an operation are we talking about, Mike? Like, because when you talk about like a tractor trailer load full of tires once a week and 120 car count day, like, are we talking a pretty above average for the time and area facility?
Yeah, at the time, I think we were the biggest independent shop in the state. I think we were 18 bays.
Okay.
And this was, late 80s. So there may have been some bigger, like pure tire stores, but we had 6 quick lube bays, no pits, but we had 6 bays that were full of GS guys just busting tires and changing oil, and alignment lift. And then the rest was, technicians. At the time, we probably just had C-techs, to use that term, which is probably distasteful now, but we didn't have any real high skill guys at
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. I understand that. So that's bigger than a lot of even the dealerships would have been back in the day for sure, right? Like you're talking
Yeah.
18 bays is,
Yeah.
I haven't worked in a facility that big yet. We are the biggest dealer I worked at in Ottawa. We were we were about 14 bays, in a big shop, which now is not that big from a dealership standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dealerships are throwing up 45 bay service departments these days.
But I mean, for me back in 2004, when I first walked into it, I was like, holy jumping, this is, this isn't like the little former converted gas station, 4 bays that I'd worked in. It was a big deal. That's pretty powerful stuff that your dad way back then was already making sure that you understood that, right? Because we see it all the time, right? How second generation shop owners, right? Their father was a fantastic mechanic and they become a fantastic mechanic. But sometimes they don't learn I don't want to say the right stuff, but they don't learn necessarily the business side of it to really become exceptional, not just average, but you kind of, you didn't have, I don't want to say you didn't have the obstacles, but maybe you were a little bit more prepared for some of those obstacles, whereas some of the other shop owners that dad was a great mechanic, I became a great mechanic. He taught me how to set up this and the carb and that and the whole thing. Your dad was focused on, by the sounds of it, making sure that you knew how to do this and make money at it. And that's,
yeah, he made all those mistakes. And then he was intentional in teaching me the lessons that he learned from those mistakes so that I get to make new, different, exciting mistakes, but they're on a different level. Right. Yeah. So that's,
wow.
We should all aspire to do that for our kids, is to set them up for a success greater than the ones that you've already built yourself.
And I think that's so key. I mean, I hope that I'm just a small portion of this industry for sure. And I'm don't have my fingers to the ground of everything that's going on, but if I can see that trend change, right? When I see second generation and third generation shop owners, if I can see that trend kind of come out to where they're finally starting to do coaching and they're finally starting to say, hey, this is what, a proper way to set up your shop is. This is how you properly charge. This is your margins. If we can get that, we can turn this sucker around in a very short period of time, I feel,
Well, and we need to. Yeah. And, one of the things that you said a minute ago kind of, rang true is that you have so many second generation guys that grew up learning how to be a very high skill technician. And, so many shop owners, right? No matter how they got there, they are high skill technicians who are low skill business owners, for lack of a better term. Why is this industry the way that it is? Why can't we have nice things? Why is it so broken, right? Yeah. It's because of, let's be honest, it's shitty owners. Mm-hmm. Like, everything can be tracked back to poor management, poor ownership, and so many of our crappy owners are world-class technicians that get tired of working for crappy owners and want to go open their own shop, but they never learned how to be a good owner. So and they fall into the same traps that the place they were working at fell into. But it takes 5 years for them to go from world-class technician to crappy owner. It's a slow, perilous, slippery slope down that to where they're ground down to a nub and they start making crappy decisions and treating people poorly. And they don't realize that they've become the thing that they hated and that they ran away from.
They bought themselves a job, right? For all intents and purposes, like you jumped out of one frying pan into another frying pan because, and I don't mean to say that with any kind of disrespect, because I think for some people at the end of the day, if they didn't make 5 more cents, or say at the end of the year, they didn't make $5,000 more than they made the year before, but they were in charge, it was theirs, then I can understand that seeing to be still worth doing, right? Because it's mine. I didn't make any extra money, but it's mine. I got to call the shots and I took all the responsibility and the whole thing. I understand that. The pride thing, you can't pay your bills with pride, but some people just sustain themselves on pride. I'm not going to fault people for it, but it's just like you said, I see it's a cycle. I used to get really mad at people, shop owners, when I saw the cycle happening all the time. Me sitting on the outside before I started to network with so many people like yourself and Lucas and David. And as I've networked with them, I realized it's not a malice thing that the cycle keeps going on. It's just lack of oversight, lack of training, lack of introspection. Like it's, they don't know what they don't know, as Lucas says. So
it's just like anybody starting out in a new career, right? You go from your career as a technician, you get ground down, you decide that your career is going to be a shop owner. It's similar, but there's a different mentality, right? And they're starry-eyed, everything's going to be great. I'm not going to do any of the things that happened. And they get ground down to a nub. And then, there's a value, right? So let's say, technician Johnny's making $85,000 a year. He's fed up with the system. And he goes and he makes $85,000 a year, but he did it his way, and he was his own boss, and he wasn't answering to anybody but himself. There's a value to that for a year or two or three. But if he's still making what he could make in a shop, he's got all the risk. He's got all the exhaustion, the sleepless nights. He's busting his ass 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours a week. And then he's got to go home and he's got to do the books. Or his wife is doing the books or whatever else it might be. There's got to be an evolution towards being a business owner and away from being just that rock star genius technician. That's, if that's what you are and you don't want to evolve away from that, then I say, just find a shop that you're happy with that treats you as valuable as you are and stay there.
Because it's not the best thing for the industry, right, Mike? If everybody, like the scenario that I just laid out, where everybody, okay, so you go and you make the same money, but it's yours, it's your business, and you assume all the risk. That's really not what the industry needs, is it? Is more people doing that? I mean, I think that's fair to say, and maybe it's a not the most popular opinion, but I've heard others voice it, that the industry doesn't need more of these lone wolf kind of, I'm going to do it my way and to heck with everybody else's thoughts. I think the industry needs to, if we're going to fight the battles that are going to be ahead of us, and I don't want to say, it's going to be the OEs versus us, but I mean, it probably will be something similar to that, then we need to be much more unified. And everybody going out and saying, I'm just going to try and, get myself treated better because I'm going to call the shots, is not going to leave us much to have to work with when that battle arrives. And I know this is starting to sound like a whole...
I mean, there will always be a segment of our industry that is that lone wolf guy. And, that's okay. There's a segment of the consuming marketplace that wants that individual. So that's fine. But to what you said, there's a portion of our industry that needs to go out of business, that need to pack it up and go back to work for somebody else or go to a different trade. And when we're dealing with, the quote unquote technician shortage that we've got, it seems counterintuitive to say that people need to leave the trade, but some of the people that are creating the reputation that our trade has need to leave.
Yeah. What do you think is going to be, like we've heard Lucas talk about barrier of entry and stuff like that, but what do you think is going to really start to push that to where we see? Like, is it just, do you think it's going to be an age out thing, or not keeping up with the tech, or just what? Do you need to have 3 shops in order to kind of have the, I don't want to say buying power, because that's like alluding to maybe, more how dealer groups operate?
No, I mean, so you don't have to be a multi-store operator or some giant operation. And I don't think that technology or access to information is going to run the little guy out of business anytime soon. Eventually, yeah, but I mean, the average car in my market's got 103,000 miles, and so I know that that's going to be a lower number and a lower age the further north you get, just because of rust issues. But there's still 3% of vehicles are EV or whatever, of new vehicle purchases in my market are EV. It's going to be a long time before the technology is so advanced that a one-man show can't get things done. And as long as we don't really screw it up and lose the right to repair fight in government, which I don't believe that we will, I think we'll stay ahead of that, because I think ultimately politicians realize that the right to choose repair is popular with the voters.
Yes.
So I think we'll win that
Yeah.
eventually. But I don't think access to information or the evolution of technology is going to run the little guy out of business for another 20 years or more. Will it be harder to be a single location operator and to be the little guy moving forward? It will steadily get more difficult. Yeah. But not in our career. And that's a problem for my kids if they want to take the business over, frankly. It doesn't mean I don't care about it. That doesn't mean I'm not thinking about it. I am, because from a selfish perspective, I need to position my business to be ready for any evolution that's on the horizon, to set it up for success for my children or for whomever buys it from me if my kids don't want anything to do with it.
Is that, and that's, can I make the assumption that that's kind of a goal of yours, is to see it stay in the family?
Only if they're interested, and my oldest turns 13 in 2 weeks. So I got time, but in 10 years, if any of them are interested, I'll expect them to have voiced that interest and get started in the business. All through growing up in school, I was busting tires and changing oil. But when it became obvious that I was going to get involved in it, I didn't come back and I was manager Mike. It was, actually he threw me in the way back, the far back bay, and I was doing spray in bed liners, which is miserable work. Oh my God. But they're going to need to work their way up through the company. Just, they need to understand what the folks in each position of the business, what their life is like before they can lead them.
Yeah, I believe that. It's like that old analogy they say where it's like you should treat the janitor with the same respect that you would treat the vice president or CEO, because everybody is an essential part of that machine, and I like that says a lot about your father's character to not just hand it to you on a silver platter, right, and make you really work for it. Because I think, and again, this is not me picking on a lot of owners that I have worked for, but I have seen it where the prodigal son just kind of is always around but doesn't really know what the tech does or doesn't really know, and then they take it over and you see that ship sink, right? And it's whether you can say, okay, well, maybe people don't respect that person, maybe it's jealousy, whatever it is, it's still sunk, and
well, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I am not a technician, but I understand that that's a blind spot in my experience and in my perspective. I was a service advisor. I think I was a pretty good one for a long time. So that's one of the reasons it's important to me that my right hand man in my company, the general manager over all my stores, started off 11 years ago now with the company as a technician. And then he was a shop foreman, and then he was a store manager, and then he was a manager over all the stores. And he still goes to technical training along with management training. So realizing that that's a blind spot, I need to have somebody who can tell me, no, Mike, that's a mistake, or you're being a dumbass, or whatever it is, from a technical perspective.
I understand where you're coming from, because and that's, but even not necessarily to be a tech, the fact that it wasn't just like you drew a salary and got to hang around, and sit in the office and talk on the phone or something, like the fact that you're
actually. No, I had to earn it all. That didn't, there was a period of time when I came back to the business after I tried to do other stuff. And I say tried because really what I was doing was I was really good at whatever I wanted to do, but I only did enough to be able to keep the party going, to keep the bar tabs paid and everything else. I was, I was not making good choices at that stage of my life. So it was good that I came back, but I thought that, I was just going to hang around until Dad decided he was done, and then he was going to give everything to me. And I think he was perceptive enough to realize that in my immaturity, that's what I thought. And there was a very distinct period of about 3 weeks where he had me read a few books, and he had me have some long conversations and meet with, his core group of advisors. And it was like, this business exists to take care of our customers and take care of our team and to take care of this family. And this business is always for sale. If somebody comes in with a briefcase full of cash and there's enough in there, it's going to be sold tomorrow. And so when I am no longer a part of this business, it's going to be because someone purchased it. That can be you, or it can be someone else. And it's like, oh shit, well, I got to pay attention, and I'm going to have to buy this for Dad. And it was a process over several years. I would buy shares a little piece at a time as I could. So, it was kind of a bubble burst for me, was that, oh, wait, I'm going to have to be a grown ass man and do this. So
sometimes though, the roads that we take like that, right? It's you don't see the value in the lesson at the time, right? But I think we are who we are because of what we go through. I believe that. And
yeah, well, it was about the time that I was getting married, and I was getting out of my wild child phase, and I was not resentful of it at all. It made, by the time he shared it with me, it made sense. But if it had been, if it had been when I was 19 years old, I probably would have been butthurt about it. But that's
so.
Maturity matters.
When you touched on the technician shortage and you kind of gave some air quotes, let me hear your thoughts on, like, is it in your mind, can we say that it is definitely a real thing, but is it over exaggerated maybe a little bit? I know.
I got a lot of thoughts on that. I think
that's why I asked.
There's a technician shortage for people that don't pay well, for people that are abusive, for people that don't treat others with respect, the people that don't charge enough to be able to do all those things. One of the things that Lucas will speak to commonly is you've got to be profitable enough to take care of things when it goes off the rails. Because if you don't have enough money to take care of things when they go off the rails, that creates an incentive to do things that are sketchy, right? We made an honest mistake and we blew that lady's motor up, and she doesn't need to pay for a motor. We need to eat it. Well, if you're profitable, you've got the money in the bank to eat it, and it's not the end of the world. If you're struggling to make payroll and you need to eat an $8,000 motor, that's a bigger problem. Well, maybe you're saying, well, Miss Jones, we had no way of knowing that this happened, and you're going to need to, I feel really bad that this happened. We'll help you out, and we'll give you, employee discount on that, or, whatever it is,
cost or something. But we're not responsible, so it's just a unfortunate luck. But here's one at cost, and let's bump our labor rate down, and or and when you say sketchy stuff, it's like when they say, okay, Mr. Tech or Mrs. Tech, that's a crappy mistake. That's a terrible thing that happened. You put the thermostat in upside down or whatever, right? You overheated, the engine killed it, blah, blah, blah. You're going to donate that labor to change that out. And, so that I'll never be on board with that ever.
100%. So I had an epiphany at the ETI conference in Albuquerque with Brian Pollock. And okay, tangent. Yep. The first time I ever saw your name was a conversation with Lucas Underwood. And I think it was 2 years ago, we did a Facebook Live to announce registration for ASTE. And it was like an hour long, and it was Lucas and David and I and one or two other people, and we were just kind of blabbering, talking mess. And I went on a rant about how flat rate is not evil and was not the cause of all the problems in the world. And you had sent him a message that said, I don't know who this Mike Allen guy is, but I want to punch him in his fucking face.
Yeah, I remember something.
And and I was like, I don't know who this Jeff Compton guy is, but I don't want to have a drink with him.
And here we are.
But here we are. But oh my gosh, I went off on the tangent and I lost my point. What was the question?
The flat rate thing and why I was so vocally against it, and you are.
Yep, and my epiphany with Brian in Albuquerque. So I was raised in my dad's shop, and I've only ever worked for my dad or for myself. And I've never worked at another shop. I've never worked at a dealership. And so the entirety of my perspective was in that world. And so I've been like, flat rate is not the problem. The problem is crappy owners. The problem is people who don't charge enough to be able to pay enough, or people who don't market well enough, or don't employ advisors that are talented enough to keep the bays full so that the technicians have more cars than they could ever possibly work on, because flat rate works great if you have more cars than you can ever possibly work on and service advisors who can sell everything that's
you
found,
are not wrong.
Right? You don't need to be unethical. You don't need to make shit up. You just just feed the machine, and you just have a building full of
Mhm.
animals. And I always wondered why that was so hard to understand.
Yes.
And when flat rate derails, in my mind, it was because there's not enough cars, because the owner's not doing their job of marketing, or the advisors aren't doing their job of converting phone calls or selling the things that are found, or the technicians aren't doing good
Yeah.
checklist and finding the things that are needed, or they're, poor quality work,
Yeah.
whatever. And I was, sitting, having a conversation with Brian and some other folks. And he was, his whole company, and he has 3 stores
Yes.
also. He's a
Yes.
technician. They're all
Yep.
salary. There's no incentive based pay
Yep.
in his company. And he's so strongly opinioned about, how terrible flat rate is. He was telling me about all the times he got screwed as a flat rate technician in his
Mhm.
career at independents and at
Yep.
dealerships. And the examples were all people coming in the back and saying, or not even saying anything to him, just taking
Yes.
time away, just changing the
Yes.
time. And I was gobsmacked. Like, what do you mean they're changing that?
Yeah.
That you're kidding me, right? Why don't you just pack your shit up and move out, right? And he's like, because everybody
Mhm.
does it. Like, it never even occurred to me that was a
Yeah.
thing. If I'm cutting the price, because I screwed up as a service advisor, or as a manager, I'm giving a concession to the customer, and we're taking dollars away, that those dollars come from the owner. They don't come from the
Right.
technician. The time stays the same, the dollars
Yes.
change.
Yeah.
I had no appreciation that it was a
Yeah.
thing, that if the business owner decides to cut profit, that they're then going to take money away from the person who did the work. That's bonkers to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, it is. And when you say it out loud, it's still amazing that so many do it. And I want to apologize because, I feel like our mutual friend Lucas, like he puts you out there a lot of times as this, massive proponent
Yeah.
for flat rate. And I don't think that's quite the case. But it was a situation of Brian and I talk every day a lot. And we have hours of conversations recorded, through our rants about, this is, flat rate did this to the industry, and flat rate did this to that job, and all that kind of stuff. And flat rate did this to me, and this is why I feel this way. All are very valid points. So I was coming when that happened, I was coming from a place where it's like, I wasn't getting the whole perspective, right? It was kind of like you were, and I was like, oh, Lucas, who is this Mike guy? His head's so far up his butt, I don't know how he can see to get home. And I want to apologize because, like I have said before, that flat rate can certainly work, and I would be a hypocrite if I said that it doesn't work, because I made a lot of money. I did it for a lot of years, but it is something that, unfortunately, and I'll say it again, in this industry, there are too many people that use it as a Band-Aid instead of using it as the good tool that it can be. It is. Lucas says the same thing. It is a Band-Aid to cover up for incompetent, inept, poor management is what it is.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah,
and
yeah, I believe that every style of compensation has underlying limitations and problems that can be addressed with management, with ownership, owning the situation, and they're just challenging and difficult in different ways. I have evolved my opinion to the place that if there's a technician that I believe has got the skill set that we need, and the aptitude and the attitude,
Yep.
right, that we want him or her to be a part of our company, I'm going to pay them how they want to
Yep.
be paid. They want flat rate, great, because that's my preference. It still is my preference is flat rate. If they want salary, okay. If they want a base plus a bonus, that's fine
Yeah.
too. I'm not going to lose somebody because they want salary. I'm not going to lose somebody because they want flat rate. I'm going to pay them how they want to be paid. Now, there's going to be varying levels of accountability.
Sure.
If they're true flat rate with no minimum guarantee, and I've got a ton of bays, and I'm not dying for space, and they're performing, 30 hours in a 45-hour week. Well, if I'm not squeezed for base space, okay. If they're okay with that, I'm okay with that. Whatever, because it doesn't cost me
Yes.
anything more. Now, if they want $120,000 salary, and they're turning 30 hours in a 45-hour week, unless all they are doing is high-level diagnostics and electrical problem solving and wiring, then I got a problem, and they got a problem.
That's fair. That is fair.
I mean, so the level of there's an inversely proportional level of accountability with guaranteed income versus variable income. Additionally, I don't know. I very much get soapboxy on this kind of
No.
stuff. It all comes down to shitty owners, though. Good owners can make any pay plan work. If you have enough good people, if you're in a very rural market and there just aren't enough good humans, that's a problem. I'm fortunate that I live in a medium-sized metro area, and there's enough good technicians out there that I can find them.
Yeah. Because we've heard the proponents and people say, well, there isn't a shortage of technicians. There's a shortage of competent, qualified technicians. And I have always responded back to that with, well, qualified is depending on what you need them to do, right? If you hire a C-Tech, and if I screw this up, I apologize, because it's up in Canada, we don't tend to use ABC too much. And as technicians, I mean, we speak the same alphabet, but I mean, we don't tend to use that classification. So if you hire a C-Tech and then you're trying to give him more drivability, or her, than they have ever seen with no training and no tooling, you cannot really call them incompetent. It's like trying to take a fish and say, I'm going to take that fish and I'm going to throw it off my back deck and I want to see how far that fish flies, right? It's not going to go well. So, and conversely, if you take a guy that is very strong on, drivability, electrical programming and stuff like that, and you give him an engine job that has to come in and out in a rusty old car in, the flat rate book time, no adjustment for whatever, and he doesn't knock that out of the park, or she doesn't knock that out of the park, again, people fit in certain roles. And if we can identify as an owner or a shop manager, whatever you want to call it, if we can identify where people fit in the role that they're best suited for, are you really the best manager or owner for your role? Probably not. Right? That's a bold statement to make. But I think that's the case. I think in order to be successful as a manager, especially, you have to be able to recognize skill sets, and you have to be able to put those people. And some people are just not, we've heard Lucas talk about, not every shop needs a top tier diagnostic and drivability tech. And that is true. And a lot of techs don't like to hear that, because right now the popular thing is to push yourself to be really good at drivability and electrical and really good at diag. And that's where the future is. And that's where the money is. And none of that is necessarily false. But you have to walk that line, because if you get too much like that, you can really pigeonhole yourself into, you may have to move away from the area that you're in to get the money that you think you're worth. If there isn't a huge demand for it outside of a dealership network for somebody that, you're in a tough spot. You really are. So
I think, what you and I probably define as a true top tier technician who is able to address almost anything that you throw at them. Only 5%, maybe less, of technicians need to be that, right? And I would say most shops don't need that individual if their area has a mobile diagnostician, right? Who has that, because most shops can't afford that person, right? So I mean, it's the people who listen to this podcast, the technicians that listen to this podcast, are probably already trending towards that top 5%, maybe the top 1%, right?
Yeah, that makes me feel good. If you think that that's my clientele or my listener base, yeah, we would all take that as a compliment for sure.
Well, they choose to spend their free time learning about their field and their trade, not just the technical aspects of learning, but also what's happening in their trade. And that is not typical, right? So there's a higher percentage of the people that are going to hear this that match that 5% descriptor, right? That need to be at the best shops. That's one of the things that I consider as we're growing our company. I've got 3 very different locations. I've got 13 bays, 7 bays, and 4 bays. I've got a rural-ish, commuter community. I've got downtown metro, and then I've got a university on just off campus, right? So very different customers, very different demographics. They've got more or less money, right? But I don't need a you or a Brian in every
Yeah.
shop.
Yeah.
You know, I probably need one in the
Yeah.
company, but what I've got is there are tools now available for communication. I can't imagine that there's not some cadre of world class technicians that you guys have that you communicate every day in a group about problem solving and hey, this is what I've got. I've seen some of the Facebook groups and they're trash. But private communication. So we've got Slack in our
Hmm.
company, and there's a general chat with everyone in the company, and then there's a technical chat with all the technicians, and then there's a shop foreman chat with just the shop
Right.
foreman, and then there's just the service advisors, right? So, um, you know, find those peers that you identify with that you feel like you can, iron sharpen
Yes.
iron with, and trade information with each other and communicate daily,
What
every
a,
day. I've got a group of 3 other shop owners in other parts of the country, and we talk every single day. I was texting with them right before we
yeah.
logged on.
What a fantastic tool that is for you and your company to have actually set that up in terms of, because for all intents and purposes, the tech at another location gets to know who his, for all intents and purposes, who his partners are that aren't even necessarily in the same building as him, right? And you can spitball problem vehicles across that all day long. Like that's exactly what a lot of my DM chat is all day long, right? Is either sharing memes and jokes and funny stuff, or it's discussing this industry and it's discussing problem vehicles. And I got to thank you for putting me in the classification of Brian as terms of top tier talent, because I follow that guy around and just like, I am not at his level, not even close. I can ask Brian any question and he has the answer for it. And if I could ask Brian about 100 problem cars and he would be able to have the answer. He never really needs to contact me about a problem car. He is on a next level for me. I was talking with a young apprentice that just started with me today. And this is me kind of just bragging about Brian a bit. And I said to him, I talk with some pretty smart guys, quite often in this industry. I said, and I would put them probably in the top 20% of, skills. And I said, that guy, Brian, if we had a skills competition with some of the top techs in the country and say you gave them a network problem, an Ecotech timing job, a transmission pull, and a set of ball joints, all 4 would probably get through all the jobs. But I bet you at the end of it, Brian finishes all 4 of those vastly different jobs faster than anyone else. And that's what he is truly. And he hates, he's very downplays his abilities and he's very modest and aw shucks. And, the guy is incredible. Incredible.
What a smart guy.
What he knows.
You can just tell when you're sitting and talking to him that dude's got something going on up there more than most of us.
And it's not just the technical ability to be able to troubleshoot this. He has had so many different engines apart, transmissions apart, differentials that he doesn't even talk about. You know what I mean? And he just does. It's not like he gets through it. He kills it. He does phenomenal on the time and the quality and the way it's done. He's next level, and it's perfectly fine. And I'm not trying to make him blush and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, but he is.
I need to ask Brian a question because I know that he'll listen to this eventually. I don't know how long. It might be 2 or 3 weeks before this is released, I imagine.
Yeah.
But Brian, if you listen to this, you got 3 shops now, brother. I mean, is it time for you to not be that guy anymore? Do you need to bring that guy into the company so that you can focus on the other things? Yeah. I think you really enjoy being that guy.
Yeah, him and I talk about that all the time, and he definitely gets emotionally invested into what all 3 of the locations are doing, right, and how they're doing and everything else. And he takes it as a very serious responsibility that he wants to see. He wants to be the waves that raise all ships, right? He wants to be that, and I love that about him. I mean, there's another person. Well, there's people I know that are just as passionate and crazy about this industry and want to see it well. I surround myself with them. I intentionally do that. It is only because of them that I'm still in this. It is only because of them that I'm sitting here talking to you, right? It is only because of those people that I have met through these, you mentioned the shitty Facebook groups. I hung out in those for entirely too long, and I still do. And it was never a situation of trying to, belittle anybody or anything. It's just I wanted to make it something that I think at the end of it all, It'll never get to. And it's like, I wanted it to be IATN, but on Facebook, and it will never get to be IATN on Facebook, and that's okay. But
I think the dudes that made IATN so amazing when it was at its prime are all retired. And I think this generation just communicates differently. And I think that, each medium has its time. And I think it's harder to get to, like my memory of IATN at its peak was some of Dad's texts using it, right? And it was, there's no bullshit, just the facts. You better have done your due diligence before you go asking, or you're going to get just destroyed. No stupid questions. And I feel like modern social media groups, there's so much bullshit that you can't get that very like dense, calorie rich food, it's just very dense, high quality content with not a lot of fluff.
Like I
don't think that's.
I saw somebody post a question about a brake pedal problem, and they called it a Grand Caravan. They didn't state what year, and I'm shaking my head, ready to throw my phone out the window, because I'm like, okay, so I've seen Grand Caravans way back in 1998, and I've seen them in 2022. Like, what are we talking about here? What system do you have? And then it's just like, me from 3 years ago would have been just absolutely sideways and would have probably berated that poster. And instead, I still made a response, but it wasn't nearly that caustic, because there's just no point. There's just no point. It's not that person is, I look at it this way. It's not that person is dumb, but it really shows when that person works at a dealership and they're reaching out on a Facebook group that's not even brand specific. And that's the ability that the question that they post. And I retort with, go back and ask your shop foreman to help you and let us know what it is that you're actually working on. 3 years ago, I would have said I would have just lost my mind. So growth. But I mean, it's a situation of, I just think that is the new generation now that is coming into this industry. That is just how they communicate. That is just how they talk. That is how they give us problems. And it's like, here it all is. Tell me what to do next. And whereas if you'd have been on IATN and you'd have posted that, you'd have been like, your butt would have been on fire. You'd have been lit up so bad. So all I tried to do was to try to make it more like IATN. And I finally have accepted and realized that it never will be. And that's okay. I just, okay. I shift my direction to something else. It's not about necessarily solving. And it never was. It never was about, in a Facebook group for me, about trying to give somebody the answer to fix the car. It was to try and teach people how to better fix cars, how to better diagnose cars. I realize now that those people, when they're on Facebook, they are merely looking for the fix for the car.
Looking for somebody to do it for them. They're not trying to learn. They're trying to get an answer.
And so coming back around to flat rate, Mike, that was one of my things that I always had as a negative for it, is because I saw too many really good, talented techs that lost some of that passion of like trying to diagnose it and take the challenges on, because it's just like, listen, I just want to get this bugger fixed and out of my bay to get the next one,
So couple of thoughts come to mind. One, I want to talk about Paul's post about charging for learning. I think that was a great conversation that came from that post. And two, flat rate preventing skilled guys from becoming more skilled because they got to beat the clock. Yet again, is a symptom of an owner who hasn't taught his service advisors to sell diagnostic time. Initial diagnostic, secondary diagnostic, tertiary diagnostic. You need to be willing to pick up the phone and call again. And you can't call again unless you've laid the foundation that, hey, Ms. Jones, we see check engine lights on these vehicles all the time. We get permission to start off at $175. That's going to cover our initial testing, inspections, and evaluations. We're going to have one of two conversations when I call you in a couple of hours. It's going to be, hey, Ms. Jones, here's what we found. Here's the test that we've done. Here's what we believe needs to be done. We know that this is bad, and we've got to replace that. We'll complete the testing procedure after we replace what we know is bad. And if there's anything else that you should be aware of, we'll let you know. That's one of the conversations that we might have. The other conversation is, well, here's what we found out so far. we've done X, Y, and Z, and here are the results. And we still don't have a definitive answer. We still need to do A, B, and C. Now, the next step on that is I should have an answer for you, by tomorrow afternoon, and it's going to require an additional investment. Do I have your permission to get started? Yeah, and you can color that however you want to. But if we've prepared the client that you're going to have one of those two conversations, and you're going to start off at, whatever the initial cost is, and you're either going to get an estimate for a repair that might not be the end of the road because there might be more after that repair, or you're going to get a request for authorization on more testing. Well, then, it's okay. You don't have to feel pressured to cut the corners to learn what you're doing. You can do that because you have faith in your team up front to sell the time. Is everybody in my company doing that effectively? No.
Okay.
But I would say that 75% of my advisors are. So, it's a constant struggle. That's one of the things that is difficult going from one location where you're on site every day and you're involved every day to going to multiple locations where you have to place your trust in others to carry the torch for you.
Yep.
Right. And you have to understand that they're not going to care as much as you.
Yes.
And they're not going to put in the same level of effort that you will. And you've got to come to terms with, well, maybe if this, and if this is just an audio recording, let's say that I'm holding my hand around my chin. If this is what the average in the market is, and this is what I am with one location, because I'm there every day and I'm talking to every single customer, and my hand's way up in the air. And when I go multi-location and I have to have other people who are doing it, and I can't have my hand on every car, maybe that comes down an inch or two, but it's still way above what the general industry is. You got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And if that's not okay, if you can't come to terms with that, then you need to just have one awesome kick-ass location that's the best in town. And that's okay. You can do that too. So I don't know. It's
yeah.
I don't even know where we started with that. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, because, when you mention how they'll never be as invested as you will, right? That I think it's the fact that when I hear people lament about that and they're just like, I can't understand why, to you, it doesn't seem so simple, or why you're not giving, they say, well, you're not giving 100%. Your 100% when it's yours will be different than my 100% that I give you when it's
you're 100% when you lose your house if things go tits up.
Yeah. Right. And that's, it sounds like a very jaded attitude to take from it, but it's just reality. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you have a lot on the line. You have a lot of risk, right? It's yours. Just like you said, if you have 3 stores and people come in and don't perform well, and you lose a store, that's a huge loss, right? That person that works in
this, look, I got a 10-year lease. If I have to close that store, the rent still is due for the next however many years. I got to deal with that problem, and that I'm committed to that.
Those people may lose a job, but they find another job, right? You
tomorrow. Place, everybody in our industry can find another job tomorrow.
So going back to the flat rate thing, not that I want to pound that into the ground, but but it's an interesting perspective to have you here and to be able to discuss it. So how do you think when a shop, because here's always been my gripe and Brian's gripe as well, and a lot of people's gripe. When you look at a traditional flat rate system and you say, okay, you're going to go in there and you're going to do flat rate, you're all necessarily paid the same amount per hour. Then it just becomes about how many hours you're selling, right? And if you're heavy diag, heavy programming, heavy wire repair, whatever it is, the nightmare cars, the problem child, it's really hard to produce the hours, right? You heard my original podcast years ago where I was like, don't even mention the word production to me. Talk to me about proficiency. Show me what you can fix. I'm not impressed by your hours. And that is still on my core. But I mean, if somebody says, well, what kind of money do you make in this industry? Okay, how do you pay that person that's going to get those nightmare cars? What's the,
Well, so the first issue is that you operate on the assumption that everybody makes the same amount per hour in a flat rate system. And that's not okay. The 22-year-old kid who, went to tech school and he got out of NASCAR Tech or WyoTech or whatever it is. And when he was, 20 years old, he doesn't make the same as you, right? Because he doesn't have the same experience. He doesn't have the same efficiency. He hasn't built half of his own tools, the way that you may have. So The answer to that question is, I mean, there are many answers to it, right? But if you're saying from a purely flat rate place, let's say that I only paid
Mhm.
flat rate. That was the only thing that I did. Well, the dude who gets all the problem cars and the hard issues and just the testing, maybe he only does diagnostics and then we pass off what he finds to
Yeah.
the next guy. Well, if he's on flat rate, he's got to make 55, 60, $65 an hour, right?
Yeah.
And that kid that we just described is probably $25 an hour because we're comfortable with him doing brakes or suspension and chassis work, but we're not going to give him any drivability or noise diagnostics or anything of that nature. So, and there's a spectrum, all from that bottom end all the way to the high end,
Mhm.
right? And in my company, most of the really high guys have a
Yeah.
guarantee because I know that they're going to get the problem cars or they're going to get the comebacks or they're going to help unscrew the things that the young guy screwed
Yes.
up, right? And so they're not going to be able to have the same level of efficiency. So they have to have some kind of guarantee. But I still want them to have a portion of their income that is performance based because when they kick ass and take names, they need to get
Yes.
rewarded for that,
Yep.
right? Because maybe, God willing, there's a couple of weeks where we don't have a bunch of problem
Mhm.
cars and all we're doing is just killing it, and they need to be killing it on a higher level than the
Yeah.
young guy. I was listening to one of your episodes. I think it just released. It was the episode with Brandon
Just dropped
Dills.
on Tuesday. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and Brandon's a good dude, and you're talking about how low skill guys make more than high skill guys because high skill guys get the hard stuff and low skill guys only get the gravy. And when they screw it up, the screw up goes to the high skill guy to
Because now we
fix,
really need it fixed.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and like in my mind, I was like, holy shit, yeah. If that was the reality in my business, I would also hate
Mhm.
flat rate.
That's what I. There's so much that gets lost on us when they. Oh, you guys are just you're so anti flat rate, and I don't understand why. I keep reminding people that when we're talking in ASOG, you're talking to changing the industry, and you're talking to people that are pro flat rate. You're talking to 2% within the industry that actually implement it properly and it works for them. The rest of us, most of our experiences in flat rate has been from a dealership standpoint where it's like you walk in the door and if you have, an ASE or whatever certified, say you got a Ford master training, blah, 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 you top out at this, the guy down the bay from you could have the same certs and not be able to fix a sandwich. And he's going to make he's going to make the same hourly wage as you. And you know what? Because he's not fed the problem child, he's going to take a better paycheck home most weeks out of the year than you will, because they just can't dispatch
So,
him that kind of work. But we need him to get the breaks done. We need him to get the appointments in and out the door, and we've got to.
so you're rewarding incompetence.
Well, very much so, yes. And so the anti hate or the hate of flat rate for me comes from that, because I was above average in ability in terms of problem solving, and I watched the guy and he wasn't dumb, but man, he played like he was dumb. You know what I mean? Like he just pretended like he couldn't solve the problem, and so it didn't
Today,
feed him that kind of work, and he just
so today I was home with the kids because it's summer, kids are
yeah.
out of school, and our childcare situation dictated that I had to work from home. One of the things that happened today was I was asked, since I was home, to take my boys. I've got a soon to be 13-year-old and a 10-year-old and my 8-year-old daughter. Take them and get their hair cut. And
Okay.
so I got no interest in that. Right, my kids got no interest in the haircuts. It's always a big thing. And so I take them, and my middle child wants to get a mohawk. And so I said, "Great, get a mohawk, buddy. It's going to be awesome." Woof, straight like the whole
Yeah.
deal. I'm never going to be asked to go take the kids to haircuts again. So, mission failed successfully, right? So my son is
Yeah.
thrilled. My wife is
Right.
not. I never get tasked with that
Yes.
again. So that guy was failing the mission successfully so that he can make more money being lower skilled.
Every time now, Mike, I have a conversation about flat rate and that scenario unfolding, I'm going to think about your son's mohawk. That's great. Thank you for that. Because I was going to ask, well, what does Mrs. Allen think? And you obviously, I don't even have to ask. I can just picture. When you say she's not thrilled.
I know. I knew what you would think before
Yeah.
it happened.
Yeah.
He said, "Dad, can I get a mohawk?" And I said, "Absolutely, son."
Yeah. So that's where it comes from for me is the distaste for it, right? It's because it was used against me for too long to keep everybody equal,
Yeah.
right? Well, what are you complaining about? You still made 45 and big deal he made 55. Or big deal he made 50 cuz I was never going to be number 1 ever. There was just the system's not set up where if I had to do, 12 really complicated diags that week and he had to do none, he's just going to get more breaks and flushes than me. And if we're all the
Yeah.
same, if it pays out at 24 an hour and he sold 55 and I sold 42, that's a big whack of change difference for me. That was like, getting the problem ones done, because like Brendan and I talked about, if you don't get the problem cars solved, you can't sell them the flush next time that they come in. You can't do it. So to me, I was,
Well, and that was the epiphany with Brian was now I kind of understand it because it never even occurred to me that that would
yeah,
happen, right? Because we compensate. It's a
hmm,
meritocracy. If you prove yourself to be valuable, you earn more
yeah,
money. If you prove yourself to be a dumbass, you probably don't stay with the company, right? But in understanding more where Brian and you and other guys who just hate flat rate come
yeah,
from, I get it. It makes more sense to me now. But I hope that I can also help you guys and others understand that uh, flat rate's not the problem. It's shitty
yes,
management or poor owners or lazy
hmm,
owners that are the
hmm,
problem. And any pay plan will be bad if you've got a terrible
yeah,
owner, if you've got a terrible
yeah,
manager. And not any, but almost any pay plan can be a home run if you're in an awesome
yeah,
organization.
yeah. So how do you set it up? Uh, Maybe I don't want to ask like to divulge some secrets, but I mean, the conversation kind of came up at some point about, how do you set up how do you put them on the scale balance as to who do you compensate better financially? Do you compensate your really high performing tech, or do you hire your high performing advisor?
I mean, it's two different things. It's apples and
Hmm.
oranges, right? My highest performing techs make more than my highest performing service
Okay.
advisors,
Okay.
but not by a
Right.
lot. My highest, I mean, a high performing tech, without technicians, nothing happens,
Yes.
right? Without service advisors, the technicians will still sell some
Hmm.
stuff. you know, Something will happen,
Yeah.
right? It might not be on the same level. That being said, a really high skill advisor is really high value because he's going to feed three or four high level
Yes.
technicians. He or she. I mean, I've got. It's not an equal split, but I'm working towards that. So, everybody's on a performance based plan of one form or
Hmm.
another, with a couple of exceptions. I have a couple of dudes that are just hourly, very low level, entry level guys who are learning, or retirees who work part time, that kind of stuff. And all of those performance based plans are tied to the same key metrics. So everybody wins together or everybody loses
Right.
together. And I want all of them to win because the more they win, the more I
Yep.
win,
Yep.
right? And so, is I look at it like my job as the owner is to bring the right people in the business. It's to provide the right equipment so that they can get the job done and make sure that the facility is up and running and to make the phone
Hmm.
ring. If I put the right people in place, I provide them with the right equipment and the right training, and I make the phone ring constantly, everything else should run, right? Because the advisors are going to convert the inbound phone calls to customers and convert the DVIs to sales. And the technicians are going to diagnose things and do a quality DVI and do the work in an efficient manner, without a lot of comebacks and that kind of thing. And it all just kind of it runs like a sewing machine. It's amazing to watch in action when things are
Right.
going right. But if any one of those pieces of the machine screws up, it's a
Yeah.
train wreck.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure on me that I have to have good people in every position in the business, or it negatively impacts everybody's
Hmm.
income. So it works really well, or it works really
Yeah.
poorly. There's no in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't seem to be right. Like I
So
see either really, really well performing shops or I see train wrecks, you know?
Well, I mean,
Well, not train wrecks, but shops that have a lot of improvement to make, and maybe is a better way to say it.
I mean, I think Lucas and David have been talking a lot lately on their podcast about there was some shop owner they spoke with that was doing like $1.5 million in revenue and had no money. He couldn't pay the bills. That I think that is way, way more common than people have any idea of. I think Lucas touts the statistic that I think came from, I don't remember where it came from, but it's that the average automotive repair shop is netting 5%.
Yep.
And it's appalling to him and to me and to the people that listen to the podcast and people in the groups, because the people that listen to the podcast and the people in the groups are already on the front end of that bell curve, right? But the large majority have never even heard of ASOG or of Changing the Industry or of Jaded Mechanic or of Vision even, or ASTE. They live in a bubble and they live on an island and they're by themselves and they're just, languishing in their ignorance.
It's the same on the tech side, because it's like I still see countless young people and I see countless established technicians that if I say Paul Danner, they have no idea who I'm talking about. And I mean, Paul laughs because it seems like he gets mentioned in every episode, but it's just it is what it is, Paul. Because I'm dumbfounded now that when young people like up here, for instance, right, when we do our apprenticeship training, when they go into these classrooms and they go into what we call these blocks of, for all intents and purposes, like a college course, 3 months at a time for 4 years, that the instructors haven't already been sharing his material that you can look for free and see it, to share who Paul is. It just absolutely blows my mind. And then, the more I think of it, it's like, well, no, because those instructors maybe at that age are not on YouTube as much as I am and was. Never came across it. Yeah. Maybe they go home at night and they don't look at auto repair on YouTube and nerd out to it, right? So maybe they don't, but it boggles my mind how the shop owners, especially, that when we think, they're only netting 5%, that they aren't, do they not see that as they're struggling and then they don't reach out? Is it a pride thing, or is it just they're not, in their mind, they're not struggling? It's just always the way it's been.
They're netting 5%, but, they're making $85,000 to $100,000 a year, and they're their own boss, and they got a bass boat, and they got a cool F-250, and maybe they got a drag car that takes up one of the bays that should be turning revenue and employing a technician. They're okay with the life that they got. And, maybe the life is better than their life ever was before, and maybe it's better than their parents' life was, and it's a step up for them. And I can't fault them for being comfortable in that, right? But to what you were talking about with the instructors at the school, not, at least exposing their students to something like Paul or some of the other guys that are out there with channels. I'm concerned about the quality of the skill set and the knowledge of the instructors in our technical schools, because the technical schools can't afford to pay well enough to get really high skill guys, because really high skill guys have a very valuable skill and they're going to be out there earning, right? So you're going to make $120,000, $130,000 a year with your skill fixing cars. That car came in and it's broke, and that family's stressed out. And at the end of the day, it left out of here and it was running great. And I saved the day, and I made a ton of money doing it. That's pretty cool. Or I'm going to go to tech school and make $65,000 a year. I don't know how much tech schools pay. I know it's not a ton. And I'm going to deal with 15% of my students are passionate and love it and care about it. And 60% are mediocre. They may wash out, they may not. And then the other ones are staring at their phone the whole time and don't care.
Just had to sign up for something. Mom and dad said you're going to college for whatever, so go pick something.
So what's more fulfilling?
Yeah.
So how are you going to get good teachers?
Yeah. I think the teachers they do it for that 15%. Honestly, they're not doing it for the money, and I think they're doing it for that 15%. And I think they're doing it of that 15% to see one become the next Brendan Steckler or Keith Perkins or Brian Pollock or, Brendan Dills. And any one of these names we can, there's a myriad of them. It's
If any of you guys want to move to North Carolina, it's a great place to live.
See, here's what I got to say. For me being up in this cold Great White North, what is it with North Carolina? And it seems to be like so many people that are the top tier shops and talent seem to be all within that state. What is it? Is it just because of like you guys all kind of got organized early and started to make yourselves, or what is that? What is it about that state? Because Brian and I, Pollock and I talk about it, and it is like the epicenter of aftermarket repair that has its shit together. And why is that?
I don't know. I mean, there definitely seems to be a high density of like smart individuals.
Dutch is there.
Like,
Lucas is there. You're there.
I mean, Brandon's down here. Jim Kokonis is right here, and Isaac Rodell's right here. And I mean, there's a lot of smart individuals, and I think our trade association has helped to bring training to North Carolina at a high level. And if you're exposed to training early on, you tend to accelerate your growth faster, so you get to a higher level, right? So, I mean, everybody's heard Lucas tell his origin story a half dozen times, right? That he was a one-man operation who was ready to fold up shop and go back to the dealership to work, and he came to ASTE, and the director of our association at that time pulled him out of a technical class and shoved him into a management class, and it changed his life, right? And so, and you see how he's had this like stratospheric rise over the last 5-6 years, and there's the availability of training, and then there's this organized group of passionate shop owners and technicians that are trying to draw trainers in. And it's also the home of Advanced Auto Parts, and CarQuest Technical Institute and WorldPac Technical Institute is all centered here in Raleigh. So we've got those trainers that go all over the country. They live here, right? So that helps. So it's just, there's a lot of factors that came together to do that. And I probably shouldn't be doing this on recordings, because I'm going to be taken over as the president of the ASTA after the show this year, after ASTE. I'm the vice president now, and I guess I have to become a little bit more well polished. I got to go to the Lucas Underwood School of how to say a lot without saying anything. Lucas, that was for you, buddy. But we've got 650 members. We've got 650 people who are willing to invest annually in bettering themselves and their business and the industry. And there's value to that.
Because I mean, I cry out all the time if we could just get something the size of ASTE or something the size of Vision to come to Canada. I think we could really make some change happen up here. And that's not me crapping on my country and saying, oh, we're so far behind you guys. That's not the case at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's just that it seems really lonely sometimes up here when I'm constantly talking to people in North Carolina that are like really sharp and really have their stuff together.
I bet you could get something like that in Toronto or something. That's a big enough metro area that you'd be able to pull something together.
Yeah, but Toronto's 2 hours.
You need 10 or 15 really strong personalities to start something like that.
And I would dare to say that if I stepped too far away from maybe the industry group, changing industry, the ASOG group, and started to actually go outside of those groups and start to talk about, have you ever heard of ASOG up here in Canada? They'd go, what? You know what I mean? Like it's I want to say it's that bleak, and maybe I'm wrong. But if we were to do a poll in changing industry and ASOG of how many are actually in the Canadian contingent, I dare to say it wouldn't even be 20%. So when we talk about that's a whole country, that only 20% is getting represented in one Facebook group. And then we see how many more training opportunities and whatnot are available. And I'm not saying it's a wasteland where there's no training, but I mean, there's nothing like, nothing.
Well, there are some Canadian-based management trainers. Yep. The dude who changed my dad's life and therefore my family's life generationally, right, is Canadian.
Greenwood?
No. I don't know if he even coaches anymore. He might be retired. Kelly Bennett.
Okay, I remember the name. Yeah.
Yeah. I I think he was in a car accident or something, and I don't know if he's still coaching, but like my family is in a better place generationally because of the lessons that he taught my dad. But he had to come down to North Carolina to do it, and our trade association is what drug him down here,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I think you need to get regionally. There need to be groups of like-minded industry personnel. It doesn't have to be just shop owners, right? Because we'll have 1,000 people at ASTE this year, maybe more, and half of them will not be shop owners. They'll be technicians seeking betterment of their skill set, right? Or service advisors learning how to deal with angry customers or break bad news or whatever it might be, right? So find a group of like-minded individuals in our trade that are desirous of improvement, and then just meet after work one day a month, talk about life, talk about shared experiences, and develop an understanding that there's more cars out there than I can work on, or than you can work on, or than he can work on, and we're not competition with each other. Frankly, our competition, in my mind, our competition is the manufacturer, is the dealership. And so once you can get a community of people together who understand that it's okay to share with each other because we're not cutting each other's throat, then you can start to gain traction and gain momentum towards something.
And as bigger. I can say this as a former dealer tech, I never understood why more in the aftermarket didn't get banded together. Because I mean, really, we're already so like the dealer plays dirty. You know what I mean? Like they know every dirty trick and they use it, whether it's locked out information or locked out tooling or whatever like that. That's on the OE side. When you go to the dealer level, it's next level slime in terms of how they will do it to keep Mrs. Smith at the dealer and not in,
it's fear-based selling. Is the big thing.
So when I see the independent shops that are always worried about, well, the guy across the street from me, if I go to $100 an hour door rate, he's still at 90 and I'm going to lose all my customers to him. Like if you just walked over there and shook each other's hands and said, we're both going to be 100 and, or we're both going to be 120. And then let's try and get all the customers we can out of the dealer and into our two shops. And then you combine that by, all I know a shop and I know a shop, and you get everybody thinking on the same wavelength. You really.
So I got to say this. You can't go over and say we'll both be 100 or 120 because that's price fixing and there are antitrust laws in the United States and we'll go to federal prison for that. But what you can say is your price has nothing to do with my price. I got a text message today from a service advisor who works, 10 miles from me. He used to work for me for a long time and we're still friends. And he said, hey, we had a computer glitch and we lost all of our BG fluid service pricing. What are you charging for BG services? And I said, frankly, I don't know anymore because I haven't been on the price setting stage for a while. I said, you can text, and my GM, who he knows, so you can text him and he'll tell you, but don't forget, what I charge has got nothing to do with what you charge. What you charge is your expenses and your desired profit. And you know that because I've taught you that. So set your price and run with it, dude, because they're not going to leave you and come to me because your transmission service is $9 more than mine.
Right. Good point. Good point.
So
when you mentioned Bass Boat, from a shop owner's perspective, is one boat enough?
Well, I don't know if you know, I did a Zoom, a casual conversation Zoom the other day in the group, and the password to log into the Zoom was 2 boats.
Yeah.
Now, so all kidding aside, no. I mean, I think we all have our expensive hobbies and our poor choices financially, right?
The Bass Boat is never.
Mine was having 3 kids, but
the Bass Boat's never a poor choice to spend money on. I can tell you right now. I don't have one. But it is the end goal. It is the end goal. But I mean, and that's sometimes I think really hard and I was guilty of that sometimes, is that the employee looks at what the employer has. You talk about the race car, right? And that always triggered me because I've seen so many shops and they had a race car and it just sat in the bay, and nothing happened in that bay other than maybe fixing the car to go blow it up next weekend, right? And there was so many shop hours allotted to this, race car. And I'd shake my head at that and be like, at the end of the year, how much does that really cost? Right. And then we would say, okay, it's not a race car, but then say Mrs. Shop owner shows up on Friday and gets her car detailed, and that's, that ties up a bay and all this kind of stuff. And I used to sit there and go, like, they're just rolling in money and they're just flaunting it. As I've got to meet more owners and talk with more owners, I realize that most are not doing that. You know what I mean? There is still some bad apples that tend to, and I don't think they necessarily intentionally flaunt it, but you know what I mean, right? It's like, have you seen that meme where it's like, well, that's a really nice car, boss, and he's like, yep, and if you work really hard this year, next year, I can buy another one. That used to resonate so strongly with what I thought was everything that was wrong with this industry. And I realized that I should be more complimentary of when I see an owner that can actually have that, because there's so many right now that don't. You know what I mean? They're barely getting.
Well, it's okay if they have that, as long as they didn't do it by shitting on their
Right.
team.
Yeah.
And it's, I the first new vehicle I ever purchased for myself was last year. I got a 2022 Silverado Trail Boss. I needed a pickup truck for the company. I went and bought it, and that's the first time I've ever done that. Before that, my 4Runner had 340,000 miles on it. And it's still running. It's a great 4Runner, but those things are worth their weight in gold anyway. But for whatever reason, and I don't know what the history of this is, the industry says that if you're running a really good shop, you should have 20% net profit.
Mm-hmm.
So if your shop's doing $1 million, you should make 200,000. Yep. That's really rare. It happens in our circles because of the people that we run with. We're trying to surround ourselves with high operators, right? I made a choice years ago. I place a very high value on having time with my family and time to do the things I want to do, like take my kid and get him a mohawk,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
I didn't have to be at the shop. So I'm okay with significantly less profit than that 20% target, because I pay a lot of people really well and I give them good benefits so that they will, love their job and want to do well and want the company to do well. 5% is not sustainable, right?
Yeah.
But, do I have a bunch of bass boats? No, but that's not my thing. I got a bunch of guns because that is my thing. I like that. America. Fuck yeah. So, you should, if you're in business for yourself, it is to take care of your people, to take care of your customers, to take care of your family, and, to better your position in life. And profit's not a dirty word.
And it's been an eye-opening thing to me as I've met more people and I see that they're, I don't want to say struggling, but they're building towards that. And I'm much better now at not judging when I see somebody that has something that I don't, immediately jumping to that negative headspace that, I had to go without so that they got that. And that's not really what it's all about. And it's not, it's comparing apples to oranges again, right? It's irrelevant, I
mean, perception matters, right? I have a friend who has a shop and had it. He sold it now. He's retired. He had a shop in Chicagoland, and he bought whatever the big Mercedes SUV is, and he had it for 3 months. He'd go into the shop. It was, "Hey, boss, must be nice." And it was from the team, and from the customers, it was, "Gosh, I guess I am paying too much if you're driving that," right? And he went and traded it in, and he got a Yukon Denali, and all of that stopped.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a significant price difference between the two, right? But it was the perception.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. So, in closing, Mike, what do you? I mean, you've given us all a lot of pearls, but where, give us. No, it's for sure. You snicker at that, but I mean, it's true. Where do you see, like, if you're going to give one piece of advice to owners and one piece of advice to techs? Let's close it out with that.
One piece of advice to owners is, I am living proof of the benefit of learning from the mistakes of others so that you don't have to make those mistakes yourself. And so seek out training. That being said, not all trainers are the same. Yeah. Not all trainers will teach you the way that you want to do business. Understand how you want to do business and seek out a trainer that aligns with your values. Don't wait until you can afford it. Do it now. Sell the bass boat if you have to. Sell the sell the race car either way. Don't have any projects in a bay. Anyway, that's a tangent. A piece of advice for a technician who wants to be a career technician. I think you need to invest heavily in yourself and in training, not in tools and tool storage, but in training, because your body will fail and you need to be able to make your money with your brain. So seek knowledge and skill around emerging technology and using your brain rather than your back. If you're a technician that wants to own your own business one day, a lot of the same things that I'm talking about, but also you need to learn about the basics of business operation and human communication. So Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And Mike, I don't remember, Michalowicz or something like that, Profit First. So master how to win friends and influence people and understand profit first and the E-Myth. And you can open your own business.
That's awesome, Mike. That is fantastic. That's exactly, we had that conversation just yesterday with another podcast that'll be dropped. And I said that very same thing about how the end goal always for me was to try and see more of us develop our brain as techs. So that as the body slowed and weakened and got ailments, you could stay at least close to that pay level by being able to get the jobs that other people couldn't get or couldn't do or didn't want to do.
Or be a shop foreman or be a teacher or whatever it might be, but you need to have the skills.
Is to develop that brain so that as the body slows down and you can't hustle physically, you can hustle mentally. But I just want to say thank you. This was been, I think this was like, if you'd have, like we started off with this. If you'd have told me 2 years ago when you were talking flat rate was the greatest thing in the world, and I was half drunk saying to Lucas, I'm going to punch that guy right in the mouth, I'd have never thought that we'd be sitting here having this conversation. And you and I are a lot more alike than we're different. And it's not just because of the career that we chose, but it just is the way it is. And I want to thank you, honestly, for being here. I say this in a lot of the podcasts. You all are coming back for second and third episodes. It's going to be a revolving door because, the end goal to this is to get people familiar with the top 10%. To where they're familiar with, they know their stories and they know where their core values are and what they think, because I want to shine the light on the people that are the 10%. And I want the people that are seeing them to see that it's possible, that you can get there. And then if we do that, I think then it's not 10% anymore. It's 20%. You know what I mean? Huge difference, big number.
Enormous.
And if we can get that, then we get this industry changed. And I think that's all that this is about. And I appreciate every guest that comes on here and spends this little bit of such, time is so valuable, because, this is the only way we get this change is we have these conversations. And, I want people to know.
Well, I'm excited to have been here, and I appreciate you having me on, and I can't wait to be back on. I want you to get Dutch and Brian and the two of us. And can you get Paul on here? I'd love to hear him talk about issues rather than just repairs.
He's agreed to be a guest as well. There's like 30 people that are knocking on the door to be on here. So I'm recording.
Hey man, believe it.
Yeah.
The fact that you've got a list of who's who that want to be on with you speaks to the voice that you're developing in this field. And that's a good thing. It's only good things come from that.
And that's exactly it. And I have Lucas to thank for that. I really do. I have Lucas and David to thank for that, because they gave me the platform to not just be some grouchy, and they didn't have to push me. They just kind of had to show me a different perspective. And then it was like, okay, now I know what I need to do. I'm not going to be a Paul Downer in terms of teaching people how to fix cars, in high-end diagnostics. But I have, for some strange reason, people seem to gravitate to want to hear what I have to say about a certain topic. And, it resonates with people. And I don't know why that is. Lucas has it too. And you know what? If everybody wants to come on here and hear me rant and we'll discuss a topic, please get a hold of me. Let me know. Anybody is welcome. I will discuss anything with anyone. And I think that's...
You're correct to thank David. Yeah. Stop inflating Lucas's ego. It's already bad enough to control.
So. Listen, when his looks leave him, he's going to be screwed. That's all I've got to say.
He's a pretty man.
Yeah, he is. Well, Mike, thank you very much. And we'll have you on again for sure. Thank you.
Hey, if you could do me a great favor real quick and like, comment, and share this episode, I'd really appreciate it. And please, most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. As always, I'd like to thank our awesome guests for their perspectives and expertise, and I hope that you'll join us again on this journey of change. Thank you to the ASOG Group and to the Changing the Industry podcast. Remember what I've always said. In this industry, you get what you pay for. Here's hoping everybody finds the missing 10 millimeter, and we'll see you all again next time.